What we're going to do is, before I start the discussion of Gates and my analysis of the map that we saw, I'll give you a quick glimpse of the map that we'll be covering today. This is all about Gates and where he sends the money. The last analysis that we did was the funneling to the dark satanic pedophile network. We never thought that that was the only network we've had. I've talked lots and lots of times about how the huge structure, the big control structure, consists of many different control structures, right? And I never thought about this. We never tried to really say who's giving the money, who's funding all of this. Can one person be funding all this? Well, no, what we found with the pedophilia satanic network was that a lot of the money was coming from Soros. He was one of the primary funders in that. In this one, we're finding that Gates is funding all of this health stuff, this bio. It's kind of interesting to look at. Now, let me show you the map real quick. This is the control structure that we're going to be looking at today, guys. And basically what you can see here is that it's about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Their foundation appears to be one of the major funding revenues for health, everything that's going on with not all health. I'm not seeing anything where they care about anything except vaccines. This is where a lot of their money is going. And we're going to go through each of these various players that they're giving money to and what part of the biopharmaceutical control network they fund, Bill and Melinda Gates. And we're going to go over this. They start from creating the problem to reacting to the problem to finding the solution with the drugs. That is what we're seeing here. Okay, that's this map that we're going to discuss. All right, now if you look at this chart, this is more what they call a soft power structure. It's things happening behind the scenes that you're not seeing. There are basically three nodes on this, actually four. This node is computer modeling, and we'll talk about that. This node over here, the CDC, all the way down here, right here, all of the medical stuff, right up to CARB-X, that is the biodefense and emergency node. Now, I want to share something with you that you may not understand. You may hear about pharmaceutical, and then you're hearing about biopharmaceuticals. What's the difference, right? Because it's odd to note, and by the time you get done with this, I think you may come to the same conclusion that I do, but pharmaceuticals are chemical intervention with the human body. Biopharmaceuticals are biological, living viruses, bacteria, and so forth. Okay, so, and it can also include other things, but the big thing is, and especially what you're going to see here, is it is virus research. Primarily, and also bacterial, So that is the second node, and the third node goes right here. Can you see my little thing? I hope you can. All around, it's the World Health Organization, Gavi, and UNICEF. And this branch right here is the distribution arm of this whole thing. So we've got the modeling, which is creating scenarios, allegedly, kind of like trials. Now, they say it's all done through computers and like the war games thing. And I'm sure it is to a point. But we also have had a lot of cause to consider that some of the things like AIDS, COVID-19, and even some other things, H1N1, when that was a thing, that these things were more than computer simulations or modeling, they call it. They may have been actual real life modeling. They own that part, which is becoming the authority on predicting how to respond in an emergency. Then they have the government decision makers. This is the big decision maker right here and right here, but you're going to be surprised to find out what this is, and there's all kinds of influence here, guys. And so they create the problem, they examine the problem, and they solve the problem by distributing their vaccines, which are all down here. That's the fourth node, the major COVID-19 vaccine development. And what you're going to find too is there's been a notable change in their positioning, the Gates Foundation positioning, since Trump got into office. Also, you may hear about something called 2045 sunset. And what 2045, that's 20 years from now, sunset, is that Gates has announced that he's going to close this foundation December 31st, 1945, 20 years from now. And during this 20-year period, he's going to be spending $200 billion over the next 2 decades, which is twice what he has spent since the inception of the foundation 25 years ago. It could go 2 ways. Here's my thoughts. I think he's closing down, but he's still going to distribute and give back for everything he's done. But I don't think this is the end. I don't think this is the end of his payback. But drain $200 billion out of him, it gives a source, and he could have been flipped by the White House with some sort of deal. Now, don't get me wrong. I really don't think a man this far up, we are seeing that he's funding a major sub-matrix within the control matrix. So he is, it looks like he's funding it mostly himself. So it's kind of weird. You have these different billionaires all funding different parts of this entire control structure. It may not be as many as we think, but there's a lot of people under them that are involved. That's the problem. But it looks to me like it's very possible that the way to do this is to first cut government money to all of these thieves and evil people. And the second one is to cut off the stem to the entire sub-matrix. In this case, the health bio stuff that's been killing us for so long. So that's the nodes that we have in this one. What Gates, the foundation, of course, Gates is behind it, is doing here is he's funding multiple nodes all at once. 1, 2, 3. And this is huge money, guys, huge. He is, as I said, he's funding academic modeling, and that's when you're controlling the curriculum. It's also creating modeling as far as scenarios of what we would do. There's all kinds of things that are modeled here. What we do with the education, what we do with the drugs, what we do with this, what we do with that. So that's this, okay? And that shapes policy. And he is partnered basically with the money he gives with these government agencies. He's specifically biodefense agencies. He has bankrolled the global vaccine delivery system. Oh, that one's over here, the delivery system. Okay, so this is, because Melinda is pretty PO'd at this point, I guess, but he's also funding the entire global delivery system over here. That's why it's always good to look at maps, guys, and map things out. We used to do this on boards and investigations, because what we're seeing is this isn't isolated philanthropy. This is a structure that has been built by money. And that's really important to understand. It's a coordinated influence system that Gates has built. And his influence has been in one area, which is basically our preservation or elimination. Let's just put it that way. And the thing about this is this entire control system that he's built formally puts him outside of any kind of democratic accountability that's required. It's the agencies that are allegedly accountable, some of them, not all, but Gates is pretty much out of that situation. There's got to be an investigation, probable cause to get there, and so forth. So it was a protection mechanism, just like we saw there was a protection mechanism against the entire satanic node. They not only create this all, but they create a bubble of protection around themselves, so that the little guys have to be gotten through first to get the evidence on them, if that makes sense from a investigative standpoint. This right here, the section of computer modeling, this Vaccine Impact Modeling Consortium and the Imperial College of London are both predictive and narrative engines. The allegations have been held that the models, especially the Imperial models, produced high impact projections that justified lockdowns, mandates, and emergency authorizations. So do you see how they're controlling what happens there? Funding these groups is basically buying the ability to generate the numbers that are necessary to drive public policy and the data that is required. That's what these guys do, that can push the politicians and the people. Because remember, in a perfect system, the politicians are supposed to be doing what the people want. So the link of these right here to the US government seal is evidence that these modeling feeds directly influence official decision making. I don't know. What do you think? You tell me. Is it logical? Is it BS? You tell me. The next node we're going to look at here is CDC CARB-X. CARB-X means combating antibiotic resistance biopharmaceutical accelerator. Okay. I mean, look at the names they put on these things. It's almost like so into our face. This cluster is, like I said, the biodefense and emergency power apparatus. These are the guys that create the emergencies. See that? The health emergencies. And almost, when you consider this, almost any kind of emergency, or at least a lot of emergencies, also deal with this kind of deployment of health, biodefense, and so forth. It's important to understand that this isn't just Americans that are influenced by this. We pay for a lot of other countries' healthcare, and obviously the best science in the world is going to influence how other countries operate that don't have the same resources that we do for research. So they rely on the United States, is the point. So here we see that the foundation ties here give it influence to the agencies that declare emergencies, how we're going to respond to it, and regulatory pathways, like distributing a drug or approving a drug on an emergency basis. That's all part of this node that Bill Gates has influence over. And then sometimes CARB-X is framed as dual use. It's a dual use bridge between antibiotic resistance and broader pathogen research. The overlapping lines are read as a public-private fusion. So here you've got private and public, basically, which is the government, that concentrates or works together in decision-making. And that's also occurring here with this CARB-X too. All right, then we have the distribution arm over here. And this one here is considered the global delivery. And remember, we talked in the past about how a good scam always pulls at your heartstrings. Remember that? I don't know if you've ever seen some of the UNICEF commercials with the kids, with the snot and the bugs and all of this stuff, you know. They know how to work people, is what I'm saying. There are organizations that are great organizations that help children. And obviously, I did some graphic work, video work for a high kill shelter to try and get adoptions out and stuff. And I had to obviously have this heart-wrenching song. So it's necessary. But again, it gets back to everything, guys. It's not the event or the object of attention. It's the person behind it and how they're using it. It's with guns, it's with anything. It's with drugs, it's with health. It is with everything. You know, it's who's behind it all. And that's what we're seeing now. That's what we're seeing. We're noticing people are awakening to the fact that there's something funky going on. Okay, they lost loved ones and it wasn't necessary and they didn't have answers. And they're clearly questioning our government, although I see them being pulled right back into the medical control system through dietary supplements and off-label use drugs. So people still aren't getting it that we got to get out of the drug matrix. That is your control, guys. Get off the drugs. Train the brain to activate different parts of your body and not mentally require or expect to require something. You know what I'm saying? So that's what's going on here. That's how the system works. They're going to play on your heartstrings. All right, so this node over here, right here, which is the distribution center, the delivery center, and also what tugs at your heartstrings and breaks down any suspicions because, and don't forget then, there's the legitimacy of this World Health Organization, UNICEF, although it's not anymore. Trump's pulling away from all of that. But this is global distribution. Keep in mind, this is US, and these seem to be an arm of the US government that's creating the problem. And then all of this too, and this down here, all of that, which is analyzing and fixing the problem, and then the world knows about it, and the world jumps on board, and it expands, just like a funnel. It goes out to the rest of the world, what we say. So what we're seeing here creates a legitimacy. We're not talking about the real people, because there are organizations, I know of them, that aren't stealing money, that help people. And we're not talking about charities that are small, trying to survive, putting everything out that they're getting in, not taking huge salaries. We're not talking about that. We're talking about each one within itself is a structure, a control structure. Remember that. So now you've got one control structure here with each one of these within a control structure right here of distribution, delivery, global delivery, within a larger structure of biological assistance to the world population. And that all is within an even bigger complex that puts them all together, and all of these different things, the educational system and so forth, the banking, everything all works together. That's how many layers deep we are. That's how far removed to get to these people. All right. I hope I made these big enough. I just realized that I could do it. All right. We talked about these people, the computer modeling section. We talked about these people here that are making the decisions globally. We talked about these people that are creating the solutions to our problem. And if you'll notice, every one of these is involved heavily in vaccines. All right, so now let's just check this right here, this UNICEF stuff and all that. Who is heavily funded? It's a direct funding as well as indirect funding that's coming into this node. So he's right into the World Health Organization. So who is heavily dependent on his money? So can you see how the whole world is going to fall down when the money's cut down? So when he spends so much money on this one World Health Organization, which was the worldwide global coordinator for health emergencies, which he's also funding, basically he shapes how the regulations and recommendations occur also within this node. Actually, he's got three-way control here, and four-way because he's also funding these drug companies. Keep in mind that when he's funding these people, He's funding research to create the narrative that they want you to understand, or create the data and results that they want you to understand. So when Bill Gates is funding Novavax, that's what he's funding by and large. There's other things, part of it goes to other things, but he's funding the science to make the decisions. And then you've got this telling you what you better do. You better have vaccines. This writing laws and accelerating things. Vaccines are being made and we're distributing them across the world. It's really ingenious, you know, guys. And this isn't something that has happened overnight with a handful of people. This is what we're talking about taking down. And what we're seeing is bigger fish. We started with little nobodies getting arrested, and now then we started seeing these DEI mayors and stuff. And then we started seeing, and not only DEI, well, in the beginning it was. And if you remember, the crimes in the beginning were also mortgage fraud. We had a few of those thrown at us at different levels, mostly in the government and the Fed. Don't forget that one. We had the Fed mortgage fraud accusation. So now you're starting to see there's huge busts underway and investigations, and many busts that have already occurred regarding the pedophilia. Soon we're going to see the satanic narrative start coming into this, I believe. And this is how it's being rolled out. So the fish are getting bigger and bigger. We've got policemen now coming down for pedophilia. We've got mayors and Congress people and all of these people. So it's just building up to get to these people. We're destroying the structures underneath here to get to this guy. But like I said, he may have already cut the deal. Bill Gates is shutting down his foundation on 12/31/45, 20 years from now. It's either a desperate attempt, and I don't think so. You let me know what you think, because I think we're seeing something else play out. This is not a desperate attempt for him to throw his money into stuff. It could be. It could be. Maybe it's kind of like throw it away rather than give it to these people. I think they know they're down. I think they know they're going down quick. And I think that there's a possibility that there's deals being made on that level. The only thing that plays against that notion, in my mind, is the level of prosecution. Not the number necessarily, but the degree, the crimes. If it is proven that COVID was a bioweapon unleashed on the people, there's a lot to pay for, guys, a whole lot. And that no longer becomes a mistake when you start seeing, and it's always, I've talked about this a lot, always follow the money. Do you see when we follow the money, how we see how he controls it all? It's just ingenious. So he's dumping, hemorrhaging $200 billion somewhere. Could there be a deal? My guess is there could be a deal for possibly life imprisonment instead of execution. Just a thought. It will never get down to a ticket. I don't see that happening with this guy at all. Like I said, he's too far up there. So placed near the UNICEF Gavi area here, you're going to see Microsoft. It's helping me understand how the entire matrix is put together with so many levels. Like that, what are they, Kachinka dolls, like the Russian dolls? One inside of another. That's what we're seeing here. So this area right here is connected to Microsoft, right? That's because it's believed that Microsoft supplies data, digital ID, logistics, or surveillance cameras. And I'm sure there's many others, but they're the kinds that I think about, okay? Again, remember yesterday we saw how the police are used by the NSA and also the CIA to do their dirty work, their wet work. So that's kind of what this is. They feed what they need here. These people can then surveil you when you get their assistance or disaster assistance for whatever reason. This part right here basically connects the identity systems to the entire health funding system for the vaccines. This is separate, guys. This is different. And I'm sure, I mean, there's so many great maps there. So many great maps. And I might have to do my own if he hasn't done one on the drug matrix and the health system matrix outside of this, because that was an acute, is what we call it, okay? An acute incident of healthcare. Another system that's going on clearly, which is an ongoing chronic healthcare matrix. So I hope I made you understand that this is one part. We got to see who funds all of the other stuff, the heart medicines, the diagnostic equipment that tells you you need to have an open heart surgery. And then there's money going into the surgeries. It's all being funded, guys, and there's science that pays to legitimize that. And somebody pays for that science. So we're getting to the core of how this whole thing works. So we've got now digital control in this whole thing. And that could be your eyes, that could be fingerprints, that could be your body shape, your face, whatever. If you notice that every manufacturer, every one of these people are major drug manufacturers, and they are specifically strong in vaccines right now. The dynamics has changed over time. There was a time when I was practicing that people like Pfizer, Roche, Johnson & Johnson wasn't into drugs so much way back when. They kind of started in surgical supplies and aftercare, but they've moved into drugs and specifically vaccines in a big way. Novavax vaccines, that's a CSL. I have to look up who that is. Glasgow, it used to be SmithKline and French. And then they merged with Glasgow. So GlaxoSmithKline now, they were always into the overall heart drugs. You know who I don't see on here, which is funny, is Lilly. I don't see Lilly because they've always been into more insulin and stuff like that. Again, Roche, Glaxo, and SmithKline French, they were all into drugs as well, which were the prescription drugs, but not heavily into vaccines. I don't know who this is. I've never seen this person. Jenner, the Jenner Institute. All right, they're a world-renowned, they're medical research focused, what a shock, focused on vaccine development. So that's all they research, vaccine, okay? And they're affiliated with the University of Oxford. Now we brought England into this. And the Nuffield Department of Medicine. Who knows if the royals have any input? That is a whole nother map that maybe we can find. It's named after Edward Jenner, the pioneer of the smallpox vaccine. And then it's located actually on the campus. So that's research. Lord knows, puppies, kitties, I don't know what kind of research. And then they have a number of major achievements. Maybe you're interested. The Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine was co-developed there, providing billions of low-cost doses. R21 Matrix M malaria vaccine. Broad research portfolio. And this is what we have to worry about. It's like they've kind of like ridden COVID-19 all they can, I think. We're done with the variations and all this. They've got to come up with something scarier. I mean, don't you agree? So this broad research portfolio that the Jenner Institute has focuses on human and veterinary vaccines targeting diseases such as tuberculosis, HIV, Ebola, MERS, and vector-borne pathogens. So they're spreading their wings, so to speak, in horrifying things that could be unleashed upon the world. And then some of them, like MERS, it's so overhyped. My husband was a severe diabetic. My ex-husband, not Timmy, but my ex-husband was a severe diabetic, and he was older than me, 12 years older. And he had MERS because he was in and out of hospitals so often, and he had it. I never got it. And I always knew that the thing to do with someone is to get them out of that hospital as quick as possible. If you've got a person, and if you remember a while back, it's kind of odd how everything has changed from 20 years ago. It used to be that they would stop paying to get you out of the hospital the day after you had a baby, that you could have an amputation and they'd want you out of the hospital in 2 days. Now it's changing and they're keeping you in the hospital longer. And that's because all of these bugs, nobody's taking vials and infecting your room while you're there, putting it in your food. What they're doing is they're going to patients that have this stuff, and it's just a natural occurrence and it was always a big thing in hospitals. Nurses don't wash their hands or change gloves between each time. Technically, they're supposed to change them every time and even wash them, because there could have been something for an immune compromised person on the glove container dispenser or in the sink, on anything, okay? So it's always important, there's a certain way and all that you're supposed to deal with patients. Nurses don't do it. Some do, I don't want to say all, but it's always been an issue. So when you stay in the hospital, the longer you are in there, the more chance you have of getting all of these horrible things that they're talking about. MERS, Ebola, HIV, and all that. It's not HIV so much, but yes, you could. A dirty needle. A nurse that somehow contaminated, or a nurse with AIDS, with all of these DEI nurses. A nurse with AIDS could stick themselves as they're drawing up something. Just, if you've ever seen draw up out of a container, oops, and then put it right there. And they don't even say oops. They just prick themselves and do it. Okay, and you could be contaminated. So it's a real big issue. Get the heck out of the hospital as soon as you can, if you can. And get home care, health home care. It's much less prominent when the nurses come to you. Okay, so that's who that person was. Now, Sanofi, okay, they also, I forget what their big drug was, but it wasn't originally vaccines. Novartis has always been involved with vaccines and diagnostic things. The tests that you take to say you have COVID, okay, I don't know if they were involved, but that's the kind of things that diagnostic manufacturers do. Pfizer was not a big vaccine person back in the day. The vaccine manufacturers, 20 years ago, these companies were not big into the vaccines. At the time, it was little tiny people that were very isolated. And then all of a sudden, these guys started buying them up. So you see how that works? Same with Merck. I forget what one of their biggest drugs were, but they were making blood pressure medicines and antibiotics, and all of the stuff. And this vaccine thing is all new. So we got this whole vaccine development thing here. The foundation itself, there's been allegations that the foundation itself has positioned itself as the central coordinator or enabler across the commercial vaccine pipelines. Now, I'm not saying it happened, okay? I'm not saying it happened, but you tell me what you think. When you've got this many various manufacturers of vaccines that you're controlling with money, you tell me. And I do have those amounts. What else that isn't on this chart is this guy into? There have been meetings between Epstein and Gates, as you know. Many believe it's much more. There are claims that Epstein was very close to Bill Gates and that there were even tunnels under the home. And you've heard about the allegations. I don't know if there was ever a prosecution against Gates, but you've heard again about out-of-marriage relations, and that's why Melinda left him. There have been claims, and I'm only going to tell you what the claims were. I'm not verifying them. I'm presenting the information so that you can. Epstein operated a blackmail and recruitment operation for the elite networks, and that Gates was a repeated contact, including foundation staff meetings Whether Epstein was ever there, I don't know. But what I do know is Epstein also had money into everything. He targeted people to infiltrate. It was very clear by looking at his emails and the claims that they had. He had a staff of people targeting anybody and everybody that was influential or wealthy. So you know Gates didn't escape that. You know it. You would literally have to just cut off all ties with him, with Gates, to basically not become involved with him, because you can't trust him. They'll drug you. You don't know what'll happen. They'll send people out to you. We know what we're dealing with. We don't know exactly yet what each part of this puzzle was involved in. So Gates had this repeated contact, which indicates that there was either participation, protection, or some kind of useful proximity, a reason for associating with that person, a joint thing. Epstein's knowledge of Gates' personal affairs was leverage. And that is the case with everybody within this dark matrix. Knowing your personal life. So guys, don't put your personal life out there, especially if you're having problems and you're vulnerable. So that's how Epstein works. That's how the whole matrix works, is that they leverage you and your personal life and your experiences and your past and your level of resistance and protection. Many believe that this relationship with Epstein and Gates was not completely severed, and that the foundation's later external review was damage control. So they were trying to do damage control to either bury records or whatever when they did a review of their relationship with Epstein. Broader claims have placed Epstein as a node connecting intelligent, now I've seen this a lot, for the Mossad and CIA variants. I have no doubt that he's connected with the CIA, or was, no longer. Let's make that clear, guys, because the left take it and they make it like it's still going on. What they're doing, I'm noticing a trend, a tactic by and I don't want to say just the left. There's many people on the left, but I'm saying the structure. And what they're doing is all of this stuff that's being revealed now by Trump's administration and the current administration and the World Alliance, not just Trump. All of it, you're seeing it happen in countries around the world. All of that is now being flipped around. And what they're saying is, oh, we're so horrified. We're so horrified. We've got to stop this now. And they're all of a sudden on top of it, when the fact of the matter is the only reason that they're now so concerned about it is because they're worried about their own butts. It's been going on, as you can see, 80 years. And either they didn't care to find out then, or they were part of it. And so now all of these allegations are being used, and hopefully most of you are able to identify this, but they're still going to see things coming out that were misinterpreted, misstated, even AI stuff. You always have to check if something looks like, and it's against anybody in this administration, anybody, even an agency like DOJ, they can and will create evidence to bury them. That's just part of the brainwashing. That's what they think. But what they know is nothing can stop this. I think they already know that. Some research of this stuff is really beneficial in making us understand what we're trying to destroy. I think it's critical. It's critical that people that I have a sister who was the biggest Trump supporter I ever saw in my life. She campaigned and all this, and she's turning against him because she's just tired of waiting. So Epstein was a node connecting the Epstein, Mossad, CIA variances, finance, and political figures, with Gates positioned inside or just next to that node. Visits to the island or direct involvement in trafficking are frequently asserted for Gates. He's denied it, and there's really a lack of flight evidence at this point. That's another thing, guys. Important to understand. Everybody that was on the flight logs for Epstein was not engaged in pedophilia. Some of them were there for events that were held there. Some of them were there for some kind of funding that was going to be offered. And some of them did perhaps get drugged and all the other stuff. Some of them voluntarily went on planes. Personally, I think that a lot of them that were deeply entrenched in any kind of ritualistic stuff that was going on there were using their own planes. And they were probably flying into Water Island, and they were part of that thing that we've talked about with Maxwell's submarine license and all that stuff. So just because somebody is not on the Epstein list doesn't mean they didn't frequent Epstein Island and do terrible things. And just because somebody is on the flight logs doesn't mean that they committed pedophilia or satanic ritual abuse. If there's one, there's the other. At least if there's satanic abuse, there's going to be pedophilia and worse. Now, there are low-level weirdos that are just perverts, sick people, and they will be involved in pedophilia without it. And that's what we've seen so many of them coming down on the local levels from the police. Also, now I look to see about the Bilderbergs, right? Gates has been to Bilderberg in at least 1 year. There is confirmation of membership in a coordination forum of Western political, financial, and corporate power. So, of course, if he's one of these big players here, he's going to be part of Bilderberg. That's not just a mere discussion club, the Bilderberg. It's a venue where the policy is actually shaped outside of government accountability. And we saw how it gets into government through this matrix. All of these different things, it's so many puzzles. We're talking about millions of pieces to this puzzle, guys, I believe. At least hundreds of thousands. It could be into the low millions, this whole puzzle of how this structure is put together. And remember, that didn't happen 80 years ago. This is generational. People die. Power structures die, and they come back every time. There is a general matrix of these satanic whack jobs, okay, that built this matrix. There's a blueprint. They know what they're doing, and we were all asleep for it. So he's President Bilderberg, and I think he's high level. Then Bohemian Grove. There's not confirmed membership because we talked about it on the satanic mode before. They no longer keep any kind of rosters. They haven't for a very long time. I linked to the one on 2023, and I didn't see if he was there. I thought I did a cursory, and he wasn't there in 2023. Again, that doesn't mean he hasn't been there before. He is part of that network, part of that elite social layer that goes to Bohemian Grove. And the Grove itself is alleged to be networking, ritual events, which of course is blackmail, and informal deal making among politicians. I've said it before. There's a long-standing belief that Richard Nixon was determined to be president on a handshake at Bohemian Grove. Also, there is intelligence figures. So there's the CIA goes to Bohemian Grove. Again, all of these people, you gotta have blackmail evidence on anybody that's going to be in a controlling position within the structure. And then industrialists also. There's business people that go to Bilderberg. A lot of big shots from all this stuff, they all go. It's one big club, guys, and we're not invited. There are allegations that the foundation functions as a parallel governance structure. And I can certainly see evidence of that in just looking at this. I can certainly see that. It also functions as vaccine and health programs that serve population management or surveillance agendas. Anybody that thinks that there's not rich people up there with a depopulation agenda, it's been all over the place. Anybody that knows the Illuminati knows it was part of their agenda. Anybody that knows the Georgia Guidestones knows it was on there. What was that? 500 million people, I believe, that they want to get it down to worldwide. So there's evidence that there is a depopulation, or let's call it population management agenda. Gates' relationships with governments and international bodies put him inside the same influence architecture to the older families and the secret societies. So I'm sure, I don't even know, but this is how it works. The direct Rothschild or Illuminati members' connection with Gates are thinner, and the documentation doesn't always exist there. But when there's money, Microsoft has historical government contracts. Gates' access to political leaders and the foundation's policy advocacy are believed to be an integration into the security state apparatus. Information control, predictive modeling, we've seen the money going in there, and preparation of crisis-driven events. And that's all of this right here. Creating the crisis, solving the crisis. It all fits into place, doesn't it, guys? Doesn't it? They give you some numbers, general numbers on this. Gates' personal donations are heavily Democratic leaning. And in the most recent cycles, in the past, he also funded both sides. But since Trump got in more recently, he is more funding the Democratic side. When you think of, we talked about the philanthropy, it's not isolated. This isn't helping kitties and puppies and sick babies and all that stuff. You know, the only one in my gut that I feel does that, and off the top of my head, I'm sure there's many, is St. Jude's. I have never seen their name come up anywhere in my investigations regarding all of this. And Danny Thomas was friends. Her dad, the guy that started that, he was friends, for you younger people, with the whole Rat Pack. Not as close, though. He was kind of like on the outer circle of them. But he was part of that whole Hollywood back then. It would be interesting to check him out. All right, so what we're looking at, guys, is Novavax. They got approximately $81 to $89 million in the 215 RSV maternal vaccine phase 3. $15 million for 2020 COVID. Their notable products are COVID NVX, which is Nuvaxovid. Johnson & Johnson has had limited direct COVID grants that were identified with Gates. Historical equity holdings by the foundation. So it works two ways. Yeah, I wanted to tell you that also. It works two ways. So you can have direct funding, which is what you're seeing here by the Gates Foundation, every one of these. But there's also stock holding. And so they hold lots of stock and ownership in it. So that's another way. There's two ways they give money, or they make money, or carry influence in these. They carry influence through direct funding and also through corporate ownership. So in Johnson & Johnson, it's mostly corporate equity holdings. CSL, they have the Seqirus influenza vaccine and mRNA. So this is a newcomer up here. Here's their products. They're mostly, so he's not happy enough with just COVID. And I would say Glasgow, I didn't, like I said, I didn't look up everyone and what they do. So now we know he's funding other vaccine developments. And we also saw it earlier with the Ebola funding and stuff like that. GlaxoSmithKline. They have had, there's been a co-funding with them. About $1.8 million was combined with GlaxoSmithKline. So they did some funding and Gates did some funding. On the TB vaccine, Gates Medical Research Institute, Gates MRI. So now this guy has a research institute also, which handles broader malaria vaccine collaborations. Then there's Roche. Theirs has been mostly grants, a third way. You don't necessarily just give the company, you give them grants. And Roche has primarily received grants. The Jenner Institute, remember we talked about them? Multi-million-dollar support over the years, malaria and other vaccines. And they are listed as one of the Jenner Institute's top funding sources. Sanofi, smaller R&D, research and development collaborations. Vaccine discovery. You're seeing how many different expertise there is to get drugs to you guys. This ain't guys doing it in a bathtub, selling it on the street. We're talking about huge structures. again. So they had limited large direct COVID grants. More they were in vaccine discovery partnerships, but they did have some large grants. Notice the language there, large. Novartis, again, limited direct large COVID vaccine grants, some related biomedical research. Recent example of Pfizer, 2025 got 30 million from Gates Foundation for maternal group B streptococcus vaccine. Limited direct COVID grants, Pfizer largely self-funded COVID vaccine. Now, and again, largely, that doesn't mean all of it, but Pfizer put their own money. They were pretty big by then. That's an interesting. So what that tells me is they're on board. You don't have to buy us. We'll make the poisons. You don't have to buy us. That's what that tells me. Gates doesn't have to pay Pfizer to research and manufacture these vaccines. At least COVID. He didn't have to with COVID. Merck has had, again, limited direct large grants, but there is long-term historical equity holdings. Merck has done HPV vaccines, and their COVID interaction was limited. Then I have other key entities on the map. Gavi, to the right there. Gates was a founding partner of Gavi, guys, with $4.1 billion committed to date. Multiple pledges, including $1.55 billion for 2016 to 2025, $1.6 billion for later years, plus COVAX AMC support. Their focus is childhood immunization in lower income countries. Actually, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation holds a board seat with Gavi. So that's what we're talking about here with the kind of influence, and that's over here in the distribution segment. The World Health Organization, Gates has funded $5.5 billion across 640 grants between 2000 and 2024. It's been a major voluntary contributor, often top or near top NGO, private NGOs. So that's how he's putting the money in there. Heavy emphasis on infectious diseases, vaccines, and polio. What a shock. Then there's UNICEF. Hundreds of millions of dollars he's given to them, like the U.S. Fund for UNICEF and headquarters grants historically in the hundreds of millions combined. UNICEF has been involved with vaccine, and this is what he's given them money for, apparently, is vaccine procurement and delivery partner with Gavi across the world. Vaccine Impact Modeling Consortium, and that is on the opposite side of the map here. Okay, so now we're going to look at how much money he puts into creating the problem. The Vaccine Impact Modeling Consortium and the Imperial College London, multi-year support, such as a $7.3 million grant in 2022 for the Vaccine Impact Modeling Consortium. Earlier phases co-funded with Gavi. So see, he connects them all, $12.8 million. So he co-funds them all together, $15 million from the foundation, plus Gavi, plus Wellcome. Computer modeling of vaccine impact. Link to computer modeling on the map. Johns Hopkins University, hundreds of millions. That was one of the ones that created how we're going to handle things in the research. Like one $265 million historic million. He funds at Johns Hopkins global health, epidemiology, and vaccine-related research. CARB-X, talked about them. He's a funding partner and has given up to $25 million commitment in earlier phases for vaccines, biologics against drug-resistant threats, combating antibiotic resistance, bacterias, co-funded with BARDA and Wellcome again. BARDA, NIH, NIAID, which is the agency that Fauci oversaw, and the CDC. U.S. government entities. The Gates Foundation partners on R&D, modeling, and preparedness. They do not fund them as primary grantees in the same way. U.S. agencies fund each other. He collaborates with the NIH, CDC, rather than giving them direct money, but he funds everything that advises them. Microsoft, he was the co-founder and had limited direct grant role on the map. It's more of a technological partnership with UNICEF. So that's the money flow. Gates' largest sustained investments are Gavi, WHO, polio eradication, malaria, TB, pneumonia, and vaccine delivery impact modeling. There was a point when I started out this journey of trying to get this information, all I got was conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. And then I had to refine my searches and call it to the mat a few times. Oh, there have been significant changes. I told you I was going to tell you about that. There's been significant changes where this guy's putting his money. We know that he's shutting down the foundation in 2045. There was one documented appearance on the Epstein flight logs, I'll tell you that we can find. And that was in New Jersey, the Teterboro Airport in 2013, where he flew to Palm Beach International Airport on an aircraft. Now, whether he left there or went on somewhere else, we don't know. But you have to remember that Epstein also owned a home in Palm Beach, and there was a lot of stuff going on there. The pilot is listed in connection with the flight, Gates, Larry Vysotsky. Gates has acknowledged taking this flight with Epstein. In testimony, he stated it was the only time he flew with him, that he didn't go to Epstein Island Ranch or the Florida home. So you just fly on the jet and go on your way, maybe. And that two women described as Epstein's assistants were in the front cabin. Oh, so maybe it was just a joyride on the plane. You know, I haven't determined that yet, and that's another piece of the puzzle. Were they just, were the planes also used? We know they were. But did some of these people just go on a plane ride because they were short on time? You know, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that developed. And maybe one of these maps addressed the whole Epstein thing. So the shifts began in 2025, where he's spending his money. And it's continued into 2026. So a notable event that occurred there, of course, was what? President Trump taking office. Bill Gates announced the foundation would accelerate spending on May 2025. So that's 4 months after Trump got into office. Bill Gates announced that the foundation would accelerate spending, deploy an additional $200 billion over the next 2 decades, like we talked about, and permanently close it. That's a deliberate sunsetting rather than a perpetual endowment. So after that 20 years, the money's gone. They might be making him spend his wad of money there, you know? 2026 budget, the foundation moved to a record $9 billion annual payout. Operating costs were capped, with plans to reduce the headcount by up to 500 positions by 2030. So he is decreasing personnel by a significant amount. The budget was reduced to 14% of what it is now. So there's less money going into the foundation, less employees, more money going out somewhere over the next 2 decades. There was a renaming and structuring. The organization is now simply called the Gates Foundation. Melinda French Gates has already stepped away as co-chair. A new Africa and India office division was created to increase local decision-making. That'll be interesting. Sharpen priorities. 3 stated end goals for the final 20 years. No mother of a child dies of a preventable disease. Doesn't seem like... Well, oh, wait. Look at the language there, guys. Look at the language. Who's talking about preventable disease? That is RFK Jr., right? His whole thing is talking about eradicating all of this chronic illness because it's preventable. So that's an interesting focus there for him now to make sure that no mother or child, the thing that bothers me, it's still mother and child. What about men? You don't care if men die of chronic diseases? Something there is a bad thing. Second, the next generation grows up free of the deadliest infection diseases. Well, I don't trust that guy as far as I can throw him, but that's another, take him at his word. The next thing is hundreds of millions move out of poverty. You want to give us the money? That's a good thing. Core program focus narrowed on maternal child health, nutrition, infectious diseases, agriculture, and U.S. education. So like we've talked about very many times, it all depends on where that $200 billion is going and how it's being controlled. Just because it's coming now from the new Gates Foundation, it doesn't mean that Bill Gates is in control. Maybe that was part of that whole movement, a restructuring of sorts. So we don't know anything yet. This is what we know, and we can only go with what we know. Also, he's announced a significant new investment in AI, not a shock, for primary healthcare. Horizon 1000 partnership aiming at 1,000 clinics in sub-Saharan Africa. Diagnostics, agricultural advisory systems for smallholder farmers, and education. India is frequently cited as a key innovation hub for these applications. So what I'm saying is, nothing has changed in the position or the places that he's been involved in Africa, in children, in mothers, in vaccines. But I am seeing a shift towards prevention and healthy food and stuff like that. The key is, can we trust the guy? Like I said, there has to be. So why would he be given a deal of life? I don't know, guys, this far up. I don't know why he'd be given a deal of life. But we always have to consider the possibilities. And that's why we look at all this stuff, right? Other notable moves: large continued or new commitments, global fund replenishment, $2.5 billion again for women's health, research and development. Now that's a shift away from the pregnancy support. So he may be involved in that, it looks like, which again, we see leads us to babies, doesn't it? To the availability of babies. So I don't know if I like that one at all, but we have to see if he's gotten under control. The foundation fully exited its remaining Microsoft stock holdings. Warren Buffett ended his decades-long annual donations to the foundation. So see, he's getting it from Warren Buffett, the banking, right? Crazy. The money just goes round and round and round, guys. In short, the post-January 2025 period shows a deliberate acceleration and time-limited wind down. Higher annual spending, tighter focus on a smaller set of goals rather than every vaccine in the world that I can make. He's changed some of those, and that's a good thing. Heavier use of AI as delivery and efficiency tools, which is scary. More localized operations in Africa and India. And those poor people is all I can say, between Oprah and this and Mother Teresa. And when you think about it, it makes sense that they would victimize the weakest, and they always do. But it's just a sad thing, Okay, so that's all I have on this matrix, sub-matrix, sub-matrix, should we call it? So we're going to end this video with a quote from Nietzsche. The destruction of old power structures goes hand in hand with a new beginning. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. We've got lots of other maps from the Deep State Mapping Project. Don't forget to like, share this to help wake people up, subscribe to the channel and hit that button and choose all. And until next time, we're doing one on Dolly next. And until next time, I love you guys, and remember, nothing can stop what is coming.